What are the stats that define the Pacers 2025-26 season so far? Pat Boylan, who does many things for the Pacers radio network and their broadcast, stops by today to talk about that. We get into health numbers, passing numbers, shot-making numbers, and many other things that show how the Pacers season has gone this point the way it has, and so much more. It comes on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. Congrats, you made it through the weekend. Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and Circle City Spin. And today is my third take of the intro because my mic keeps not working. And Pat Boylan is coming by to talk about stats, the stats that define the Pacers season to date. We get into a lot of health numbers that are some shocking to me. I love that Pat had numbers that I'd never even thought of or considered that were very telling. We talk about passing, the scoring level of the Pacers, how Pascal Siakam is boosting them in a way that is great, but still has not quite led to wins, and so much more. Really good stuff. Love the way Pat's able to get into the numbers and break down what it actually means for the team. I'll let you all know now that this was recorded before the story about the Eve Misi, Bennedict, Mathurin stuff. I'll talk about that on Sunday, perhaps with a guest. But today is all about stats. Tomorrow will be all about Pacers Thunder. And let's just get right to it. Pat Boylan is here. Pat Boylan also likes stats, and we're going to talk about many of them that define the 10-35 Pacers seasons to date. He is the play-by-play voice of the Fever. He's on the radio talking about the Pacers. He's in the arena interviewing the players right after the game, the sideline reporter for the radio. Did I get them all, Pat Boylan? Hello, how are you?
You did. Hello, doing well. Good to be with you. I appreciate you getting them all because it's a long list of things that I, of course, feel very grateful to be doing, but I don't have the simplest title. So thank you. And by the way, forgive the very poor attempt at creating some sort of Zoom studio here. We are undergoing some changes at the Boylan household. So this is a spare bedroom with a poor attempt at putting a couple of decorations up. But Fever schedule out yesterday as of recording this. And, Pacers a little bit through the midway point of the season. So I've come on and chatted with you about both teams before, and good to be back with you here.
Busy times, knowing in 3 months we'll be dual seasoning again, Pat, as it goes. I wanted to talk stats today that define this Pacers season so far. Some of them good, some of them not good, some of them just like, how is that even possible? Some of them related to their identity and so much more. And I didn't know where to start because I think if you ask different people, they would say different things have been the story of the Pacers so far this year, between their offensive malaise and their attempts to play a certain way and all the injuries. But I think most people who would talk about the Pacers, Pat, would say injuries have been the story for this team so far this year. And I think we both probably have some stats about that. Do you have any related to just team health that you found shocking about this group?
I do. Actually, this is how I was going to lead, whether or not you led me into this direction or not. So thank you. Yes, this is an unfortunate example of the state of the injuries here in 2025. I'm not sure if people realize, but on Wednesday night, the last game as of taping this podcast here, the Pacers crossed the threshold of man games lost in the entirety of the 2024-25 season. So that was 241 last year. And Mathurin, Haliburton, and Toppin's injuries, which kept them out of the game against Boston, put them to 243. Now, there's all sorts of injury metrics you can look at, including like you can't just really look at man games lost, because if a team is missing their 10th through 15th players all season long, that's not really the same thing as missing your top five, for example. So you can get real nerdy with it and look at contract value or, things like PER or whatever to associate just how valuable those games are lost. We don't need to do that here because your audience understands how important Tyrese Haliburton is to this team. And we'll delve into that. And of course, you don't get to that number with only missing Tyrese Haliburton. And I think that main point is kind of twofold. You're missing your best player for the entirety of the season, and you're also missing numerous other key guys through portions of the year, including probably three of your top 6 or 7 players right now. Unfortunately, it's just kind of been the storyline all season long, and at times they've been able to fight through it. At times it's been a real challenge, but in game 45, crossing the 82 game man games lost threshold is the stat, unfortunately, of the year for me for this year's Pacers, at least so far.
That's a good one. I did not know that. Actually, I remember Denary mentioning something about man games lost during the Boston game, but I couldn't remember exactly what it was. But that's a good one. I actually will now assume that you fed him that information. So good on you for that, Pat. You're about to say you did, weren't you? You were about to talk.
Well, let me just say this. He might have gotten that on his own because Chris is a stat master. I did pass it along. However, it's very much a two-way street. Denary might have gotten that from me. I'm not sure. But I also use stuff on there that I get from Denary all the time, and he is stat master. So
the most prepared person in human history, Chris Denary. It's the
most prepared person and the best handwriting in human history.
Yes.
Both are Pacers Sports Entertainment employees.
So what I was tracking around Christmas, I did for a segment on this show was, so Miles Turner's on the Bucks. We got that. Tyrese Haliburton's out for the year. So the most of their top 9 players from last year they can possibly have available in a game this year is 7. And they had it for 1 quarter of one preseason game and have never touched 7 since. They've had 6 a few times, and the record in those games is actually halfway decent. But most of the time, it's been 5 or 4. And that's over half or almost half of your best guys from the finals year. Of course, you're going to be way worse, right? So that's part one. I have 3 health-related stats. If you don't have any more, I would like to run through.
No, please feel free.
One is the one that people have talked about a lot, 24 starting lineups. That's more than last year. That's tied for the most in the league with the Cavs somehow. And the thing that stands out when you compare them and the Cavs, the most recent game they won before they went on the road, the Pelicans game, that was the first time any Pacers starting lineup won a second game. All of their starting lineups had only won one time until that game. So they have one lineup with 2 wins. The Cavs, who also have 24 starting lineups, have a starting group with 4 wins, 3 wins, 3 wins, and 2 wins. Right? So they've at least had some of their best groups playing together. The Pacers have just been like, yeah, your turn. Like they haven't been able to because of how hurt they've been. I find that to be shocking stuff. Like how are you supposed to evaluate anything or find any sort of consistency? And they've had the same starting group for a while now. And look at that. They won 4 or 5. So I think that's part of it. The other one is 24 is the same number, but it's a different thing. It's players who have suited up. That's crazy. That's so many. It's only been half the season. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's the unfortunate irony of this season coming off of the heels of what last season was. I mean, I don't think many coaches would say that the Pacers had the second most talented team in the NBA, but they finished a win away from a championship and could have gotten there without the injury, I think, in large part because of the chemistry. And the chemistry is what you're just so sorely lacking this year because, again, missing Tyrese Haliburton is its own pillar of impossibility to overcome. But it's not the whole story. The other half is all those numbers you were jotting out, bringing up right there about all the different lineups and scenarios and all of that. I mean, how is this group supposed to find any sort of chemistry when the lineups are in such flux? Unfortunately, the thing that maybe was their biggest superpower last year has been their biggest kryptonite here in 25-26. And what's so frustrating about all that, right, is it's totally uncontrollable. I mean, There's almost nothing you can do about that. And maybe they caught some good luck all the way up until Game 7 from an injury perspective. From December 10th or so on after those early injuries last year, and they've caught nothing but bad luck here, unfortunately, since Game 7 of Oklahoma City.
Well, I actually wrote a story last year about how Siakam's minutes among All-Stars was like the lowest per game. He was like 50th at one point minutes per game in the whole league, and they're very intentional about paying attention to that stuff. And I'm not saying it's impossible that like having a strong, training program before the season isn't demanding on players, but like clearly they are very intentional about injury tracking and player management and things of that nature. And there is a lot of luck to it. And you can see all of them. Some of them are muscle use injuries, but a lot of them have been just like up and Mathurin jammed his toe, up Quentin Jackson banged his ankle, up Isaiah Jackson got knocked in the face. But it's like, what do you do about that? You don't even get your team available when that happens, and it's just brutal. And some people laugh and go, injuries, whatever, dumb excuse. Look at the Celtics. It's like, dude, the Celtics have been super healthy. That even without Tatum, they can at least roll out the same group of guys almost every night, and you can build something from that. And Rick Carlisle always says, Pat, you know it, they're an ecosystem. And sometimes you're like, whatever, you have really good players and you have really good style, and then part of the ecosystem goes away, and you're like, he's spot on. He's exactly right. And you see exactly what happens to that ecosystem when things fade away. Everybody, quick break so we can talk about game time during basketball season. There's nothing like being in the building, the energy, the crowd, that first big round that gets everyone on their feet. Fans want to be there for those moments, not stuck refreshing screens or guessing what tickets are really going to cost. That's where Game Time comes in. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage back, making it incredibly easy to score amazing tickets fast, simple, and without the guesswork. Browsing the Game Time app is straightforward and intuitive. Finding tickets takes just a few taps. Seeing the view from your seat before buying makes choosing tickets easy. You'll be confident the prices are there up front with no hidden fees at the end. They have zone deals that are super helpful for finding good value, whether it's an NBA game or another live event. Everything is right there in one place. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA and other tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account. Use the code LOCKDOWNNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off at Game Time. Terms apply. You know what else you see, Pat, when the ecosystem fades away is the lowest offensive rating in the NBA, guided by a shockingly bad effective field goal percentage that is dead last. Granted, they have been better at making shots in the last month and a half since the cut break. They haven't won a lot more. They lost 13 games in a row. But this really started early in the year. I have a lot of numbers on shooting and shot creation if you are ready for them.
Yeah, I also just finished Stranger Things, so forgive me there. But I couldn't help but, as you're describing the Celtics, thinking of I guess the Pacers are the up this world, and there's a parallel universe where they get the health outside of your best player's Achilles tear on your side, and that's I hadn't really thought about it that way. The Celtics had that horrible injury like the Pacers did, but they've otherwise, as you noted, been very, very healthy. Please feel free. I have two nuggets that I've written down. None of them are directly shooting related, but they are things that tie into field goal percentage. So I think they will pair nicely with what you have.
So just generically, let's talk about the Pacers offense. Obviously, you're last in 2-point percentage. You're 28th in 3-point percentage. You're not going to win very much when both of those things are true. Their effective field goal percentage is 30th, right? That is the guiding reason their offense has been very bad this year. They're decent and pretty good, in fact, at taking care of the ball, despite some recent yucky performances in that regard. Their rebounding is not good. It's below average, but it's okay. The reason they can't score is they don't make shots at all this season. And this is the stat that made me go, huh? How is that even possible? Pascal Siakam, amazing season, all-star caliber season. We'll see if he gets in or not. He's been playing well enough. The Pacers record is going to hurt him. So last year, Tyrese Haliburton, the difference in when he was on the floor and off the floor in the Pacers' effective field goal percentage was 3.08%. Pascal Siakam's difference this year is higher than that. It is 5.08%. He has a bigger impact on the rest of the Pacers' shooting and effective field goal percentage this season than Tyrese Haliburton had last year. That is how much gravity he is drawing. Kalen Cooper just had this perfect picture of the Celtics game where every Celtics defender's in the paint when Siakam has the ball and everybody else is left open, right? And he gets doubled all the time, and he's still putting up monster stats. Rick Carlisle saying pregame a few games ago at home, I can't remember which one, about how their own gravity stat they used to track this had Siakam as like the second or third highest in the league in terms of the attention he's getting from defenses. So when he's on now granted, these numbers are lower than last year for the Pacers who made shots, but when he's on the floor, they can score credibly enough. And he has that kind of impact. And guys are taking open shots. They just can't make them. And when he's off the floor, they cannot create good shots. And that's been a big problem for their offense. But that stat to me was shocking, is that his impact on the quality of their shots is similar to Tyrese Haliburton's from last year.
Yeah, and as right when you said it, it shocked me as well. I think it's a testament to Pascal Siakam. First of all, that I saw the Caitlin picture as well. That was pretty jarring. At the same time, I think some of the explanation for that might be when you look at the second units for the last couple of years' teams, because last year's Pacers team from early December on was pretty darn healthy, and we all know that second unit was a big part in what the Pacers were able to do. And so I think as teams suffer injuries, oftentimes the result of them you see is the starting lineups can find a way. From a Pacers perspective, you've got Bennedict, Mathurin coming off the bench that you can throw into the starting lineup when he's healthy. As we're talking right now, he's not. But theoretically, you can. You can bring TJ McConnell into the starting lineup and he's going to do a good job. If Obi Toppin was healthy, you could do that. But what you really miss when you're having this many guys out is your depth to me, and your second unit really struggles. So I think part of that is just how good and consistent and all-star deserving Pascal Siakam is and should be. I think part of it too is just a testament to how valuable the second unit was last year. Kind of along those lines of the Haliburton side of things, this is, unfortunately for me, this is an opinion that I've had for a few years that unfortunately is getting proven right, but not in the circumstances that I wanted to, which is you're seeing the team without him on the floor this year, and which is, look, Tyrese, everybody understands high assist numbers are good, but I don't think it fully has translated into just how much better he makes everybody else. Yes. I mean, Aaron Nesmith, comes in and immediately starts taking massive steps. Obi Toppin comes in from New York, plays with Tyrese Haliburton, career year. Miles Turner, his first handful of years with the Pacers, and then you look at him in the 3 full years he had with Tyrese Haliburton, and now you look at him this year. I mean, there is direct cause and effect there, and everybody that comes here tends to just kind of have career seasons when they play with Haliburton. I mean, that is the immense value that Tyrese Haliburton brings you. It's more than just a number under the assist column. That, of course, is important. But the way that everybody else performs with him on the floor, I don't even totally know that numbers can explain. But you can use the assist column. You're 23rd in assists this year at 25 per game. You were 5th last year at 29 per game. I haven't seen this stat updated in the last couple of weeks, but they were at something like 76 assist points created last year and in the low 60s this year. So those things are direct representation of not just missing Haliburton, but missing how much better everybody else is because of him on the floor. And Siakam's done an unbelievable job to still have the efficiency that he's had without Tyrese Haliburton available, but that's because he is an all-star. I think where that becomes harder, that equation becomes harder, is down the line, with this lineup and asking, I've used Aaron Nesmith's names a couple of times here. He's a fantastic player, does a little bit of everything for you, but those efficiency numbers for him are through the roof when he plays with Haliburton, and maybe not quite there when he doesn't have that ability.
Well, it's great you chose Nesmith, because I was going to conclude this by saying last night I tweeted about his struggles, and he'd be the first to admit he's not shooting well. Somebody replied to me and said he's a Haliburton merchant, and I get what they're saying. If he is, the whole team is. Like, according to the stats, the whole team is Haliburton merchants. Like, they're all good shot makers, and he helps make it easier for everyone. But to be clear about to put a bow on this, even the Haliburton off number last year for their effective field goal percentage was 54.4, and the number that Siakam is vastly improving with him on is 52.4. So they still obviously missed Tyrese Haliburton. Okay, you are next on our stat crusade today.
Yeah, and just to be very clear, my opinion is not that Aaron Nesmith is a Haliburton merchant. My opinion is that Aaron Nesmith is a very good player, and Tyrese Haliburton elevates all. That's the point there. I would say, as you look at this from the glass half full and the glass half empty perspective, I tend to be more of a glass half full guy. In fact, how appropriate, check out my water, half full, not half empty.
Ironically, Pat, my coffee is very low. Not very
maybe that just summarizes both of us. No, I'm kidding.
Uh-oh.
You are a positive gentleman yourself. Look, some of this can just simply be described, and I'm kind of on the Haliburton tangent right now, and then I've got a couple things that we'll look beyond that. But nobody has ever had a more clutch postseason than Tyrese Haliburton had. And then it's easy to forget, like, the 5th most clutch shot that he hit was a 4-point play to beat the rival Milwaukee Bucks, who were chasing them down in the standings in the regular season too. That was the 5th most clutch thing maybe he did all year, which is just insane, because it would have been almost any other player's most clutch moment last year. So let's look at the Pacers in the clutch. Last year, I think most know, but we'll define it here, within 5 points at any point in the last 5 minutes of a game. So that's a pretty broad brush to paint a game, right? I mean, usually at least about half of the NBA games are within 5 points at any point in the last 5 minutes. The Pacers went 24-14 last year. That record was the 4th best in the NBA. That winning percentage is like 63-64, I think, off the top of my head. This year they're 5-14, which is 27th. So they've gone from 4th best to 4th worst. And that's actually with Pascal Siakam hitting like 3 incredibly clutch shots off the top of my head that I can think of. But they just haven't been there in the clutch. And that does not, you can't just say the clutch is the reason for the change in the 2 seasons and Tyrese Haliburton is the answer for that. No, but it actually does explain a decent amount of the difference in the 2 records, because if you just grant this year's Pacers winning 63% of their clutch games, that ends up with a team that has 17 wins instead of 10 wins. So that's 17-28 versus 10-35. Neither are where you want to be, but one of them is pushing on the 10th seed, and the other is where the Pacers currently are. So that clutch number has gone from top 5 to bottom 5. I don't need to explain how Tyrese Haliburton affects that to you or anybody listening, but he certainly does. And, if you were to say how much of this season can be described by that, I'd honestly say somewhere in the 30-40% range.
One more break, everybody. We got to talk about FanDuel. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour brings something new. Boosts, bonuses, and surprises. It is easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before that window closes. The timing is perfect. It's right before the games, right before the weekend starts. It adds extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app, see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour, only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Yeah, 17-28 feels like a regular bad team to me that's been really hurt, and then you get clutch bad luck and you have the record that the Pacers do have this year. Something that I've been tracking this year is fourth quarter leads because of that. And that's part of, they've had 3 of their last 5 have not been good games. But since New Year's, even when they would lose Orlando at home and on the road, they're up in the fourth quarter. Cleveland and Indy, they were up in the fourth quarter, right? In Philly just a couple of days ago, they were up in the fourth quarter. I'm not saying that as a compliment. I was usually saying that to say it feels like they're playing better. Like they're getting through 90% of the game with a lead. Like that's good. That generally means you have a 50-50 chance or close to that to win. And they're not. And that's still bad. It's not good to be playing bad in the clutch. But some like stat people also are like, yeah, clutch play is just totally random, like year to year. And I think you're kind of seeing the opposite effect of last year for the Pacers, where like Brunson's game winner, tough shot, drilled it. Credit to him. He made it, right? But tough shot. Brandon Ingram's tough. Giannis's tough, right? Some of them have not been tough, but that is just like, dang, too bad. An amazing player made a good shot. And they've been on the wrong end of a ton of those this year after being on the right end of many all-time memorable ones last year. So that is certainly part of their struggles this year. And you give Siakam credit. He was a closer with Toronto before. He's doing it again, but they are certainly more flimsy in those moments this year.
Yeah, and there is a luck element to clutch, but I also think this is a great example of, I don't think it's too hard to connect a couple lines of if you have your superstar best player available versus not, you're going to win more close games.
100%.
The Jalen Brunson game, that Knicks game, Jalen Brunson single-handedly won that game with one great play at the end. Tyrese Haliburton probably has a couple of those. So, yeah, there is a luck element to it. But when you look at clutch numbers by the end of the year in terms of win percentage, you do see typically the top teams are at the top, the bottom teams are at the bottom. And it's because the top teams usually have the best players. And sometimes that math is as simple as 1 + 1 = 2.
Well, and Pat, on March 10th, they go to Sacramento, which means the Pacers are due for their DeMar DeRozan beats them at the buzzer moment that seems to happen every season as like a token Pacers moment. So we all have to be prepared for that as well. Okay, I have one more, what I would say is defining in a different kind of way for the Pacers stat this year. I'm going to say the number, and I want you to try to guess what it is. It's super random. The number is 315.4. What do you think that is?
315.4. That's
pretty high.
Is that in the passes made?
That is exactly correct. That is their passes made per game. That is something Rick Carlisle said many times they want to lead the league in. Last year they were like Golden State and then were like deadlocked at the top. They're a third this year. They're still doing that. And you go back to media day and training camp, like they said, they wanted to play the same way. They have the standard. They have this style. They're trying to do it with different players. That's great. I think that's actually a good thing. Next year, these players will be more into that style. What this says to me, and the point I want to make from this is, one, as we've talked about a million times, it's harder without Haliburton. He's a great passer, whatever. Push that to the side. I think, and something that they talked about with Jay Huff recently is how it was tough for him to adjust to the system. I think the Pacer system, it clearly works very well. They've made 2 conference finals in a row, is hard to learn quickly. It takes time to get into it. And so all the stuff we've already talked about. How many players have they had? How many injuries have they had? Jay Huff is new. Other guys are new. That is, if you're trying to play this way, that's great. But you're going to have games where you lose 5, 6, 7 points because someone is just not ready to do all that. You have to be ready for the next action immediately. You have to know all the code and lingo immediately. You have to be ready to move and cut and pass and all this stuff. And it takes a minute. Like players in their first game or sometimes, basically, unless you're Jeremiah Robinson Earl, your first game looks bad, right? And so that is, I think, just as much of a part of their challenges this year is trying to play that way with different guys on the floor all the time. They just Quentin Jackson's hurt. We'll see if he's back for the next game. New rotation coming up, right? It's just very demanding to keep updating what you're doing, who you're doing it with in a style like that. When you're healthy for a long time, this style looks awesome and you can beat anybody, as the Pacers have showed. But it's very hard in the reality that they've had to do it. And so you get into the classic, like, well, should they change the style? But what does that do for the next year kind of stuff? So it's a good debate. But I do think I think it's good that they're trying to play this way. But I also understand how that has limited what they can do when they're actually playing this year.
Yeah, I think it's important that they play this way because you're hoping that this is a blip on the radar type of season.
Yes.
And a lot of what you're working on here is development and guys taking the next step forward and having bigger roles in this type of offense. So you're going to need it to work for you in future years. So I don't think it makes sense to deviate from that this year. We were talking chemistry, earlier. It's actually a pretty impressive stat that the pass number has still been so high without Tyrese Haliburton because, he's a wizard at just moving the ball around. It never sticks with him. To not have him and for the ball to still move as much as it is I think one of the real positives of a challenging season. But, there's also a difference between moving the ball and then ultimately that pass that leads to a layup, a dunk, a wide open shot. And then when you go down that path, there's kind of a couple angles there as well. Do you have as good of shooters and playmakers taking those shots? Well, when you're this injured, that answer is no. And also from a chemistry perspective, are those shots, quite as high quality, which again, now you're getting to the point of where you're beyond my capabilities, but it would make sense to me that the passing number is maybe is as high or close to it, but the quality of the quote unquote final pass that leads to the shot, if you told me that wasn't quite as good because you don't have Tyrese Haliburton, that's not that hard for me to understand. But also at the end of the day, you've still got Andrew Nembhard, who's, averaging like 18 and 10 here over his last 10. And we all know he's a good ball movement guy, good passer. And TJ McConnell is as well off the bench. So if you really think about it, those guys have been mostly healthy this year, and those guys are still really good at it. So it's not totally shocking in that regard. But I do think there's an angle of who's taking those final shots and the exact quality of looks from those passes that those are generating that probably if you were to get on like a second spectrum level and maybe talk with somebody in our analytics department, I don't know the answer to that, but it wouldn't shock me if both of those quality levels are maybe not quite as high.
Yes, quality and quantity certainly very different than last year. Both. I mean, they were at about this level of passes last year, a little more. And you can see some of that in hockey assists, potential assists, things of that nature, but not all of it is captured, obviously. And the quality part is you have to watch the games and see that, hey, sometimes the ball gets into the second or third row. All right, I have reached the end of my list because we do have a finite amount of time, and we're already over the time I asked you for. Do you have any more stats, Pat?
Oh, just a couple of these are byproducts of really what we've been talking about. The Pacers are 3-31 when they allow 110, which is kind of a crazy stat when you think about just a couple of years ago.
That just ran me over like a truck, Pat. Good Lord.
Allowing 110 was kind of like what they wanted to do a couple of years ago, as long as they weren't allowing like 130. But it goes to show you, right, like how perfect the offense has to be right now to win games when that's been the scenario. And just this isn't even statistical, but I would say as I looked at my final thought here would be as I looked at this season in general, I kind of hoped it would be for the Pacers the type of year that maybe doesn't end in an NBA Finals run, but the silver lining of a gruesome injury, could you experience development that you maybe wouldn't have otherwise because guys are getting a bigger opportunity? And at the end of the day, do you have an asset that maybe you wouldn't have had otherwise? And while this season has been trying and difficult and challenging for everybody involved, I still think you're in position for both of those goals to be checked in a major way. I mean, lately, Andrew Nemhard's played very well. Johnny Furphy's played very well. Jarris Walker's played very well. The other guy I would put in there would be Bennedict Mathurin that you want to see development from. Unfortunately, he's been a little injured. And I can talk with you in a couple months about where this draft pick potentially ends up and what that means, but that could be a real asset too. So I think as difficult as the year has been, your big picture goals are all still right there. And I think that's exciting because if this year can turn into something that fuels future seasons, then it's going to make that Achilles tear feel a whole lot less burdensome as it does right now.
They could look back and smile in a few years perhaps and go, the draft pick and the Furphy year was worth it if it makes them better. In the long term, certainly, I've very much enjoyed the Aussie experience of late. Pat Boylan, thank you very much for, one, redecorating your home. I did not even ask you to do that, so that was very kind of you. And hopping on here to do this with me. I already said it at the top. Where can the people find the things you say about the pro basketball teams here in Indiana?
I wish I was a better decorator because this was just grabbing a couple things and setting it on the couch in my guest bedroom. But I at least wanted to try for you. Yeah, at Pat Boylan Pacers on Twitter is kind of the hub of where I send out stuff. But hopefully this will be coming into your screen in the next few months. We got the schedule out. Hopefully some more announcements coming that direction on the Fever side. And you went through all of my titles beforehand, so I don't need to go through them again. But radio pregame show coverage, I think not everyone realizes this. If you're out and about in the car and it's 7 o'clock on a game day or whatever, we begin 30 minutes before on radio as well with the pregame show coverage. So would love to have you there. And as always, good to join you right here, Tony.
I would say on the Twitter front, you have the highest ratio of the number of times you tweet and the number of times I retweet you of maybe any human being on the planet. So that is the praise I can give your Twitter feed.
I have gone down in quantity and attempted to just be more a quality type tweeter. What I do is different from what you and Dustin do. So I don't think people are coming to me for the updates in the way that they are for you. So I try to make those tweets impactful. So look, I appreciate it. You've got a larger Twitter audience than I do. So when you retweet it, you help me. I appreciate it.
It's always like the Pacers' third quarter was 10 seconds long. And then Pat's like, that was the first quarter with no fouls in 25 years. And I'm like, look at that. Perfect. Here you go, everybody.
I've got some resources there. So I've got a little Slack channel where I can just ask some questions too. So it's not always me figuring these things out. I've got some people behind the scenes that help us.
Don't tell people that. I want everyone to think you are the whiz of the research. Everybody, we'll be back here tomorrow talking Pacers Thunder, a finals rematch that has lost just a wee bit of luster from the opening night game between the two teams. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you very soon.